Welcome back to Mastering Magento. In the last video, you followed along as we set up the basic software packages needed for running your Magento store. In this video, we will step through the installation wizard. Let's get started. First off, we need to get our hands on the Magento source code. The Magento website gives us two options. We can either download the Community Edition directly, or check out the source code from an SVN repository. I usually recommend using SVN, especially if you're familiar with it, because I've found that in my experience it's helped upgrades run more smoothly. So to check out the code, Magento actually gives us an example command, so we can just copy that and paste it into our terminal. So first we'll want to change into the directory where we set our virtual host's document root. In the previous video that was var www Magento. And you can see that in between now and then I changed the owner of the folder to my own Magento user, so I don't have to use sudo in this case. The last important thing to remember is that when you're checking out a branch like this, we need to specify the destination folder as dot, meaning the current folder. Otherwise, it's going to check it out into a separate 1.7 folder in the current directory. So this should work. And actually, the SVN checkout usually takes a while, so we're going to fast forward to the next bit of this video. Now that our SVN checkout is completed, I can clear my terminal and get ready to set up our database for Magento. We're going to log into our MySQL server with the root user and password that we configured when setting up the server in the previous video. Once logged in, we'll want to first create a database for Magento to use. And then we're going to want to create a new user. So the user I'm creating only has access to the Magento database and is using a very simple password, just the word Magento. Lastly, in MySQL, especially in command line, we want to flush the privileges. That way our user account exists and is accessible to any MySQL clients. Okay, so we can exit MySQL and let's clear our terminal and we should be ready to follow the installation wizard now. The first time you visit your Magento server in the browser, it will take you through the installation wizard. So let's go to magento.local now and see what happens. So the installation wizard is pretty straightforward. Once you proceed through the software license, terms and conditions, you'll be taken to the first of many screens where Magento will collect the pertinent information for your installation. On this first screen, you want to make sure that you select the proper time zone. This is very important because Magento stores all database timestamps in GMT. So the first of many errors you may see when proceeding through the Magento installation is the file system permissions error that you see here. This is telling us that certain paths in the Magento folder structure need to be writable. So in order to fix this, let's jump to our terminal and make sure that app, etc, var, and media are writable by the web server. So the permissions currently on the app etc folder, for instance, are owned by me, the Magento user account, and only group writable. So what I want to do is sudo change the owner of that folder and all of its contents, so I'm specifying recursive, to the web server user, which on my server is www-data. And once I do that on app etc, you can see now the config XMLs in that module folder are owned by www-data. So I'm going to do the same for my var, and what was the other folder? It was media. Okay. Alright, so media is good and var looks good. So let's see if this error goes away. Okay, that's better. We're getting a different error now. And you can see that these are some of the extensions we installed in the last video. So what I want to show you here is that one of the paradigm shifts using PHP FPM is that you now have a process for PHP you need to restart. Since we now have a PHP service, we have to sudo service PHP FPM restart. So this is going to reload our PHP configuration, hence now loading these newly installed extensions. All right, so let's see if that goes away. Great. All right, so the configuration screen is basically asking us for all the credentials for connecting to the MySQL server. So we just set up that user. Username is Magento, password is Magento, and for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to leave the table prefix blank. For the web access options, we want our base URL to always have some sort of top-level domain. In the previous video, we set up our virtual host to use magento.local, and I did that on purpose. I didn't use Magento only because if there is no top-level domain, Magento has issues with cookies. So if you're using a single word for your base URL and having troubles logging in, that would be why. Make sure you use something with a .domain. Admin path is something you can customize. By default, it's admin, but you can make it anything of your choosing. That allows us to achieve a little security through obscurity. Someone would actually have to guess your admin path in order to attempt to log in. Some of these other options are pretty self-explanatory. One of the things I like to do is skip the base validation when developing locally. Sometimes it has issues dealing with local URLs, such as magento.local. We can also check the use web server rewrites, even though this is referencing Apache. All this is going to do is not put the index.php as part of the URL like you see here. And since we're developing locally and don't have SSL certificates, I'm going to leave this option here unchecked. All right, and we can proceed with our installation wizard. Okay, so you'll notice that that last section may have taken a long time. It may have even timed out for you. So in the next video, we'll be going over the command line installation process, which is a workaround for any timeouts during the online installation. There's also a few tricks you can do in your terminal. If you take a look at your Etsy Nginx sites available Magento file, the virtual host configuration, you'll see that there's a few fastCGI commands elevating the timeout. So this is specifically for long-running Magento processes. And if you have something like this in your Nginx virtual host, maybe you didn't have issues timing out. But for those of you who did, hang on till the next video and we'll get things installed through the command line. Anyway, at this point, Magento is simply asking for a user account, and we're going to say admin sample.com, username admin, and password. You can use the password of your choosing. Encryption key is something you can leave blank. Magento will generate it for you, so we can continue. Here's your encryption key, which Magento generated. Now you can keep this in a safe place, or you can simply look it up at etsylocal.xml. Actually has your encryption key in it. B6A06, etc., etc. Matches this key. So at this point, Magento is installed, and we can proceed with logging into the admin. But I'll leave that for the next section. So let's recap. In the beginning of this video, we downloaded the Magento source code by checking it out from the SVN repository. This is a recommended approach for technical users that are familiar with SVN because it will help you upgrading Magento in the future. Next, we set up a MySQL database user so that Magento has its own user and doesn't have to share an account with other applications on the server. Following the installation wizard was pretty straightforward. However, if you run into any timeout issues or the installation crashes, you can stay tuned for the next video where we'll be going over an alternate installation method via the command line. So stay tuned.